Thank you, Ron. Welcome to the first panel of the afternoon. This should be a very interesting panel. We have 4 great speakers to talk about natural gas conversion to fuels and chemicals. So this should be really interesting, if not a little more sexy. We're going to go just left to right. There's no particular order here. We're going to start with Joseph. Joseph's the VP of Technology, R&D, and Engineering, so you wear 3 different hats, I guess, at GTC. He's got a long history at Arco and Lyondell and Olefins and Aromatics. He's got a BS from Auburn and an MBA from U of H.
My name is Joseph Gentry, and I work for GTC Technology, and we are a technology licensing company, and we work with refineries, petrochemical plants, and some gas processing. So we have an office here in Houston, and I'm going to talk about chemicals out of natural gas. So what the background for this is, a lot of the operating companies are looking for the lowest cost of production. The feedstock is the highest cost item. So we've been developing processes to keep the feedstock costs lowest. And we have a breakthrough technology, it's different from what you may be familiar with, called G2A, gas to aromatics. We have some corollary technologies to turn ethane to ethylene, propane to propylene, or butane to butenes, and I'll introduce that here today. So the main process, and this morning you were introduced to a chain of chemicals using synthesis gas, and that was leading to all those. That's not entirely true. There is another route to make the chemicals. And the whole reason you use synthesis gas is you need to activate the methane. Methane is a stable molecule, and use oxygen, partial oxidation, you make synthesis gas, and then you can turn the CO into different things. But there are other ways you can activate the methane as well. You can use halogens, sulfur, and oxygen, and what we use is a halogen. And particularly we use bromine. The oxygen, one of the problems you have with that is when you're doing the partial oxidation, you end up over-converting. So you make some CO and some CO2. And when you make the CO2, then you lose some of the feedstock into the carbon dioxide, which you don't want to do. So it's not a perfect separation. And when you use the halogen, we can recycle that completely, and you can get much higher carbon utilization. So it's a more efficient, inherently more efficient process. So the reason we pick bromine, or we use that, is you can look at the oxidation potential here. So chlorine has been used in the industry. There's a whole chlorinated industry, PVC and ethylene dichloride and all of that. Very strong. Iodine can be used, but it's not strong enough. Bromine's right in the middle. It also has a lower oxidation potential than the oxygen, so that you can recover the bromine by oxidizing hydrogen bromide. So that's the chemistry that we use. So the process that we have is a bromination. So we take methane, make methyl bromide, and then we have a synthesis. Once you have methyl bromide, that's a reactive compound. So you can link longer chains. The whole goal of turning methane into chemicals is to make longer chains. So if you have methyl bromide, you can make longer chains, and these naturally make aromatic rings. So you'll make aromatics in the synthesis reactor. Then we recover the bromine by reacting that with, you make hydrogen bromide in the synthesis reactor, and we recover the bromine from hydrogen bromide by oxidizing the hydrogen bromide. So we do use oxygen, but it's to recover the bromine. We circulate the bromine back. There are some intermediate compounds in there as well, some propane or butanes, and you can recycle that into separate bromination reactors. So that's what we have, and then the rest of the plant is just the product separation, the NGO separation, or the final products. We have some cleanup streams as well. The other related processes is, instead of starting with methane, you can start with propane. You make propyl bromide, and then the reaction there is to dehydrogenate that and make propylene. So it's an alternative to PDH units. So the questions that we ask for your participation is, what is the status of the technology and where are we headed with this? Our goal is to make cheaper ways to make ethylene, propylene, aromatics, starting from natural gas, methane, ethane, propane, butane. So anywhere you have a dehydrogenation, anywhere you want to make aromatic rings, we believe you can do that more efficiently using the gas feedstock. Gas is more plentiful, and we see that it's more abundant in the long run, maybe a cheaper way to go than starting with the crude oil to make the naphtha and then do the reforming of the naphtha. But this is a photograph of a demonstration site for the technology. This is in the United States. So it was a full unit, had a gas cleanup, taking pipeline gas, making liquid products, predominantly aromatic products. Full bromination synthesis, bromine recovery, handling of all of the materials. And so that's the status that we have. There's not a commercial plant beside this, but we're working on that as we speak. So here's a yield slate we have. This is just a case we took for 900, we put it in terms of tons per year natural gas, but it was, you can see, was the yields that we have. We have a high rate of liquid products. About half of the product goes to the C6 to C9 aromatics. Those are the feedstocks for making the paraxylene. And then there's some C10 aromatics, which is or C10 components, which is suitable for diesel fuel blending. CapEx is reasonable. We've done a lot of parametrics on CapEx, OpEx, and natural gas prices. And here we show one of the dominant uses of the natural gas is to make methanol, then turn methanol into olefins. And so that's very much dependent on the low natural gas prices to be economic. And on the same scale we would have a higher economics for our technology. So that's the introduction I had today. And so I think at the end we'll have a question session.
Next is Stephen Sims. He's the president of NGTS North America. He's also got a background in petrochemicals with ConocoPhillips. He's served many different functions there. He's been a consultant for the World Bank, and he's worked at the Houston Technology Center, BS and MS in chemical engineering, and an MBA from U of H.
When you work for a small company, you can be president. It's very good. You could be. I could have been the CEO and chair and others, but I chose president. That was enough. I want to talk about something that we haven't talked about at all today, and it only applies to natural gasoline and condensate. The bottoms end of an NGL plant, the naphtha that normally goes off to a refinery. I worked in a refinery my whole life, and I never saw this stuff because it always was just bought and ran into the crude unit, and then it was just naphtha after that. So this is the only, so it's a process licensing business, but this is a one-trick pony for naphtha. I'm president of NGTS. We have a catalyst and process that converts naphtha into gasoline at 1/3 of the cost of current technology, full cost. Let me show you a little bit about the technology so you can see why. It's a one-step process in which naphtha and methanol are reacted over a zeolite catalyst, and you produce from that yield similar to a reformer. You stabilize it, you get a 92 to 95 octane product, which fortunately has 90% of the sulfur removed and reduces benzene to where there's only 1.3% benzene. The methyl radical alkylates the benzene as it's produced. You get an off gases, hydrogen H2S, just like at a hydrotreater or the reformer, and you get LPG. For the refiners, I say the way to think of it is a naphtha hydrotreater in which the hydrogen is replaced with the methanol, and you don't have a recycle compressor. It's like a reformer, except you don't produce much benzene, and half of the methanol becomes water. That's just how the chemistry. This is why it's 1/3 of the cost. The typical processing scheme for naphtha is through a hydrotreater, at which point you fractionate it into a light naphtha and a heavy. Reformer takes care of the heavy naphtha. Isomerization takes care of the light naphtha. And you usually have something for benzene removal, reduction, some step for that. We avoid all of that in just a one-step process, very similar to a hydrotreater. I show one of our use cases is, and our biggest market is to replace existing semi-regen reformers that have a lower yield than the new CCR. For this case, for a 20,000 barrel per day unit, there would be over $50 million a year yield advantage for converting this unit into a methaformer. On-site cost estimate would be about $20 million to do that, primarily for 2 new large redundant reactors. Rest of the process is the same. We have a first unit being built in the middle of Russia. I think it's the summertime picture. The snow was pretty light at the time. It's a little unit. For us, 200 barrels a day is very small, but it's the first commercial unit being run. Should start up at the end of the month, and we'll be comparing its yields with our pilot plant work. We have about 7,000 hours of pilot plant work on the catalyst and process, so we're quite confident about the inherent process. It's always critical to see it in commercial application. What is the greatest opportunity for people, refiners around the world, if you have an idle reformer or hydrotreater in your operating refinery, that can be converted. We can convert that into a methaformer at a very, very low cost. My guess is less than $5 million, primarily for the methanol handling facilities, and that unit would pay off in like 9 months. That's just the startup of it. You can then expand it and make much more. So I say when I see a group of refiners, and there are not many here, you have any idle units, a hydrotreater and reformer, this would be a great opportunity.
So next we have Riley Hagan. Riley's manager at Ethanext. He's got a broad range of experience in oil and gas and a lot of experience in banking and finance. He was with Exxon. He's a petroleum engineer from Louisiana Tech and has got some graduate studies in banking. So very good. Over to you, Riley.
At the outset, I think it's important to talk about our technology, which is basically a new catalyst that converts syngas into to petrochemicals. And it's important to state at the outset what it's not. We saw a slide this morning that has the natural gas being reformed into the syngas, and then you break off into the 3 pathways of Fischer-Tropsch, methanol, hydrocarbon. Ours is none of those. We don't make transportation fuels. We don't make commodity chemicals. In a single step, we make higher valued petrochemicals. So we've spent about the last 8 years developing and patenting this technology. We've got patents on a family of catalysts. The work was done initially at Georgia Tech and then later at Mississippi State by Dr. Mark White, who was the head of the chemical engineering departments at both of those schools. And our work has resulted in a catalyst that maximizes gross revenue by targeting the higher value products, minimizes both the CapEx and the OpEx because we use fewer operations, and then probably in the question and answer period I can talk a little bit more about how we can gain some synergies by co-locating with refineries. So in essence, what we're able to do is take the methane and the ethane as a feedstock rather than the naphthas and get to the same place, which is either mixed xylenes. This is just talking about one of our catalysts right now. We've got catalysts that either make a mixed xylene stream or another catalyst that makes iso and cycloparaffins and olefins as an end product. And this just is a schematic of the process, which basically replaces Fischer-Tropsch in the syngas conversion into chemicals and fuels. We've got as is noted there, both patents, both families of catalysts are patented, and it's been, our work has been duplicated by other labs and also published. So again, the key elements are both of our catalysts, each of our catalysts are we think unique in that they provide a much more narrow range of end products than Fischer-Tropsch or other technologies. So you've got less back-end processing that you have to do to get to your end product. And we can either shift our catalysts and like I say, either make the mixed aromatic stream, which in its first cut right out of the reactor has about a 95 average octane, 106 research and 85 motor. So it can be used as an octane enhancer, or you can go on down that chain. And then the other catalyst, like I said, makes isoencycloparaffins, and that's also a pretty pure stream. It's about 94%. And again, it's just a single stage reactor, obviously unlike Fischer-Tropsch. Ha, gained a lot of that. You want quick, you got quick. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Riley. So Dmitry is our last speaker. Dmitry is a VP Commercial for Infra Technology. Most of his career has been in corporate finance, so he's another finance guy. He's done investment banking and done M&A work, private equity work. He joined Infra in 2011, and he comes from Moscow State University, and he's done an MBA here at U of H. Over to you, Dmitry.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Infra Technology is an international technology company which has developed what we believe is the next generation of GTL technology based on Fischer-Tropsch synthesis for the production of synthetic crude oil and synthetic fuels. The company was formed in 2009. The key to the technology is our innovative patented catalyst. It's a cobalt catalyst. It has been developed by our R&D team. And the key feature of this catalyst is that straight out of the Fischer-Tropsch reactor, we are producing single liquid product, which is synthetic crude oil. It means that this product, there are no other byproducts, there is no waste. The liquid product is fully compatible with all the existing oil infrastructure. It means that we don't need the back end of the process. We are eliminating the hydrocracking and then the upgrading of these multiple products that are received from conventional GTL technologies. As a result, we are able to significantly decrease the capital cost and the operating expenses of the technology. We believe that we are at least 50% cheaper than comparable technologies. Since 2009, we have received more than 30 patents in all major jurisdictions. We have built 2 generations of pilot plants. Our first pilot plant was built in 2010. It was a full cycle plant from natural gas to the end product. We've sold it to Gazprom in 2013 and built a second generation pilot plant, which is also full cycle and which allows us to test Fischer-Tropsch reactors up to 6 meters or 18 feet in height. We have done numerous runs with different modifications of our catalyst. We had 5 runs in excess of 2,200 hours each in these pilot plants. In 2015, we have commissioned our own catalyst factory for the production of our patented catalyst. We have done a number of paid engineering studies, and at the moment, the highlight of our industrial development is we are finishing our EPCI project for a 100 barrel a day plant for producing synthetic oil. It's very close to Houston. It's in Wharton County, about 50-minute drive from downtown Houston. Thanks to our catalyst, the technology flow sheet becomes much simpler as compared to conventional GTL processes. We go through gas cleaning, sulfur removal. We are, for the 100-barrel-a-day plant, we are using the steam methane reformer. Then the syngas, the resulting syngas, goes through the syngas conditioning block, and then at a ratio of 2:1, it goes into the Fischer-Tropsch reactor. Out of the Fischer-Tropsch reactor, we're getting, as I already mentioned, just a single liquid product, synthetic crude oil, and obviously Fischer-Tropsch water. The advantages of the process, there is no, the need for hydrocracking is eliminated. The product can be put straight into the pipeline without any additional infrastructure. There are also several other important features that this technology is offering. First of all, the catalyst, Fischer-Tropsch is an exothermic process, and the catalyst is operating at a higher temperature than conventional technologies, which means that we're generating sufficient steam for the process, we're generating sufficient heat to make the company self-sufficient, to make the plant self-sufficient in electricity. In addition to that, the Fischer-Tropsch water that we're receiving in the end is clean. Again, unlike conventional GTL processes, where Fischer-Tropsch water contains up to 7% of aromatics. Our water is clean, so we cycle it back into the process, and the plant becomes self-sufficient in water as well. So, in the end, it is a self-sustained process which can be located pretty much anywhere. The catalyst is a cobalt-based catalyst, and importantly, it does not require any rejuvenation. So we are currently guaranteeing at least 2 years of useful life without any rejuvenation or regeneration of the catalyst. The product is a very light product. It pretty much consists of 2 fractions, the gasoline and the diesel fraction. It only requires a simple distillation column to separate the two. The characteristics of these fractions are the diesel fraction is good enough to be used as summer diesel. It would require some additives to add lubricating properties to that. If the client wants to turn it into, as we have a number of requests for that, wants to turn it into Arctic diesel, it will have to go through hydrodewaxing, and then again it will be a ready drop-in fuel. Gasoline fraction will require hydroisomerization, and then it can be used as drop-in fuel. With this technology, we see a number of applications for different gas reserves. The most immediate that springs to mind is eliminating gas flaring. Because the technology flow sheet is so simple, it can be modularized and it can be put in very small dimensions. I will show you the picture of our 100-barrel-a-day plant. It's built in the dimensions of standard shipping containers. So these containers are transportable, then it can be moved to the site, and the resulting product can be blended with crude oil without any problem. For the bigger size applications of our technology, it can be pretty much used with any remote stranded reserves. The example that is always used is Alaska. It's Eastern Siberia in Russia. The gas can be turned into liquid product, which is much easier to transport as compared to building a gas pipeline. As an add-on, our technology, Fischer-Tropsch part of our technology, can be also used with coal and biomass. Now talking about the money, since we are eliminating the back end of the process, and since our catalyst has about 3 times higher productivity than comparable GTL catalysts, we believe that we are achieving, and we not just believe it, we see it in various comparisons, that we are at least 50% less expensive than comparable technologies in terms of capital costs and operating expenses. And the technology is also offering a very good economies of scale. As you go up, we are not using any precision machinery. All the equipment is pretty much standard equipment that can be made by any chemical machinery plant. The current catalyst that we have is producing about 40% diesel fraction and 60% gasoline fraction, and our R&D team promises at the moment, so no guarantees, that by the end of the year we will have the catalyst that will be producing up to 75% of diesel fraction. That's the, just to end on a high note, that's the picture of our 100-barrel-a-day plant, which we have opened here in Texas. It's a modularized, transportable plant for producing about 100 barrels of synthetic crude oil from approximately 1 million cubic feet a day. The size, the footprint of the process equipment is 4,000 square feet. So it's also very compact, and which also brings some ideas about offshore applications. This plant is in the final stages of commissioning. We will be introducing gas in a few days, and then we'll see also the resulting product. We already have the offtake agreement for that product with the refinery here. This will be used as a demonstration of the features of the technology and also of the economics of our process. There's just a few more pictures of the plant. And finally, as a next step, Infra is moving towards commercializing this technology, towards licensing our GTL and Fischer-Tropsch technology, and towards building multiple modular small-scale GTL plants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. That was very interesting. Okay, we're going to open it up for questions now. Instead of me asking questions, I'm going to open it up to the floor, and if there's not enough questions flowing, then I'll ask a few myself. Please, go ahead.
I have a question on the bromine technology. Are you partnering with Reaction 35, or and what is your rate come on?
There's a question about the source of the technology. Our company acquired a base technology from Marathon Petroleum. Marathon was the one that funded the demonstration site that we had. So that technology, what we're using is not the same as Reaction 35 technology. We have some combination of steps, some different flow schemes, different techniques. So they are a party doing some research in that area, but we're quite far along on our work.
And what volume do you have coming off the plant?
So this plant was 10 barrels a day. It ran about a year. So that's the status of that.
Yes, Dmitry, your process is getting very close to commercialization. Are you going to be licensing? Are you going to be selling the technology? Have you already reached any agreements with anybody on their usage of the technology?
Well, at this stage of the process, I think we're open to different combinations and to different ways of cooperation. Yes, the mainstream business model is licensing the technology, so we would provide the license for the use, and then we will ensure the regular supply of the Fischer-Tropsch catalyst.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Yes, Dmitry, the technology that you are talking about, is there the possibility of using it for remote offshore locations?
Well, in general, and since I'm, as you so from my background, I'm not an engineer, so I would say definitely yes. But my engineers would tell me that it depends. If you're talking about platforms, then it will probably be difficult for existing platforms because it's already so tight there. Yeah. You can design it for the new platforms, and the one important consideration for that is also that since the plant is producing electricity, it can also replace some of the electricity generation which you otherwise need on the platform. And if we're talking about FPSOs or barges or something like that, we have actually done two studies for putting a 1,000 barrel a day plant on a barge and 5,000 barrel a day plant on an FPSO. So it works.
Just following that, so I want to follow up one of the questions that we just got, and so it's pretty clear that your model is licensing, your model is you're not sure. Can you guys speak to what kind of business model you're expecting to employ?
Sure. Yeah, we're open to licensing the technology, and we're also raising funds to build the first commercial plant. So we're going to go both ways.
We're a small company, NGTS, that just has the technology, the license, the catalyst and the process. So once we get the process proven out and maybe have our first license unit, even before it's built, we'll look to someone like Joe in an established licensing company and sell the whole business to them. They have the whole package of delivering a license process, and there's no need for us to create it.
So our primary business is engineering, design, and licensing the technology. So that's our intention.
Okay, great. Did you have a question?
Yes, for Infra. The Fisher trough is pretty energy intensive. This looks like it produces a great high-value product, two high-value products, but it uses anywhere from 60 to 100% as much energy since heat loss as compared to LNG, turning it into LNG and using LNG, which is a pretty useful product, and maybe 400% more than CNG. Moving into CNG, is there any environmental consequences of creating that much CO2 and wasting that much energy out of the site?
Well, we're not wasting that much energy to start with. The Fischer-Tropsch part of the process doesn't have any emissions at all. We are recycling whatever off-gas we have from the Fischer-Tropsch reactors, we are recycling back into the reformer. So any emissions that would be related to any emissions that we have are from the reformer part, and there, frankly, it depends more on the burners, on the burner manufacturer and the characteristics of the burners. Depending on that determines the level of emissions. I can tell you that for our 100 barrel a day plant, we received a permit by rule in Texas. So we are below the radar screen in terms of the emissions.
Please.
Also for Dmitry. What about oxygen? You need oxygen for your process, and can you put that offshore on an FPSO?
Not for the steam methane reformer.
Oh, it's steam.
It's steam methane. You can use our technology with the ATR, with thermal reformer, which will require oxygen in that case. So, but we are, in that sense, our Fischer-Tropsch part is pretty agnostic about the use of the reformers, depending on the particular technology. Steam methane reforming doesn't need any external source. Steam is produced internally, so we don't need any air separation.
For a finance guy, that's a pretty good technical response.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I have one for you two guys in the end, and that is that you're both using new catalysts. You've invented them in your R&D efforts. are you planning to produce them yourselves, or are you going to work with a catalyst company to produce those catalysts?
Oh, since I got the mic, well, we are currently, as I mentioned, we have built our own catalyst factory, and we are producing industrial quantities of the catalyst already. This factory is also being used for testing the new modifications, the industrial versions of the modification of the catalyst. Going forward, I think it's not so much, we can produce bigger volumes at our factory as well. I think it's more the question of customers' comfort. So we have reached an agreement with the manufacturer in the US, with a large international company in the US, for the contract production. So whenever the need arises for that, we will trigger it. Okay. But so far, we were producing the catalyst by ourselves.
Yeah, we plan to use a commercial toller for the catalysts initially.
Okay, very good. Sure.
Yes, the methaforming catalyst was invented by Moscow Research Institute. Part of that, they have gotten with an existing catalyst manufacturer in Russia who produces it for the pilot plant and other applications like our startup. They have plenty of capacity for it. We anticipate as we move to the West, our customers will also want a Western source of catalyst. So we'll be licensing with another catalyst manufacturer. Probably, as I mentioned before, probably somewhat concurrent with selling the whole business to a licensing company. They may have preferences of who they would use for the catalyst manufacturer.
So, Joseph, I wanted to ask you. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you.
So it's fine.
Go ahead.
A question not for Dmitry.
You be quiet, Dmitry.
So, for the size scales that the three of you gentlemen are looking for, it might be a little early. Obviously, you have demonstrations planned and what you're talking about for size scales. But type of market share or size that you're looking to target to get into for the work once you've proven it out and gotten past the demonstration might be a little early for the question. I know for the methaforming, you're looking at retrofitting units that may be existing already. So that size scale may be already kind of defined. But I'm sure you could comment on what area and what size scale you want to.
Who wants to attack that first?
I gave him the out, so you can give the first. You just say yes.
Yes, our largest market would be replacing existing semi-regen reformers. It's half of the reformers in the world. And I think that's some 10 million barrels a day. So that's a huge market. We'll penetrate that once we've got a couple of full-size demonstration. I think we'll penetrate that rather quickly. The most advantaged market is probably the new reformers. That's going to be in Asia. We'll have trouble holding our price when we sell a bunch of these in China and India. But that'll probably not be my company at that point when we go to that. The early adopters will be these conversions of existing idle units. And I'm looking at one right now in Louisiana that will be a 6,000 barrel per day unit, actually processing natural gasoline from an NGL plant. Their interest in it is not so much the octane improvement, it's the sulfur removal. It's 100 ppm sulfur, and we drop it down to 10 in a one-step process. Doesn't need a hydrogen source. The octane sort of comes along. And we also have it's a specialty application for raffinate from aromatics extraction. It's a broad cut stream, but very low octane and pretty tough to put in a reformer, and it's pretty ideal feed for us. And so that's a small market we're looking at.
Let me see if I can tackle your question this way. Based on some work that Uday did for us in connection with some of the studies that ADI did, we feel like the smallest commercial plant that would still get decent economies of scale, we could build for something in the 75 million range, and that would take 2 210 tons a day of methane, or about 9.5 million cubic feet. And then depending on which of our catalysts we use, would either generate 70 tons a day of the aromatic product, or 140 tons a day of the isoencycloparaffin product.
So the question was on market share and goals, but I think the real issue to discuss is between oil-based processing into petrochemicals versus gas-based. And up until recently, the only gas-based petrochemicals were ammonia, methanol were the main ones, and this smattering of others. So, you know, now here we're talking about making fuels, gasoline, some other things. Our version is to make the full spectrum of petrochemicals from methane. And so it's going to depend on a balance between what the oil prices do and the gas prices. In the long run, it should be that the gas is much more plentiful, and so it should be a lower cost to do that. And our goal is to develop the whole chain of all of the chemicals through dehydrogenation or the cyclization to make all of the valuable petrochemicals. So it's not going to be instantaneous, but in the very long run, it could be a pretty significant impact.
So let me follow that, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Joseph, was if gas stays at around $3 to $4, and what does oil have to be in order for you to be competitive?
So this demonstration plant that we showed had a capital cost about 3 times larger than what we have. We've cut in 2 years' time very much out of the capital cost and made it inherently safer, combined some steps. So those economics with the higher capital costs were still about borderline economics. Now we're much slower, but we've taken a slight diversion because we can cut even more when we cut out a lot of the recycles and have a very simplified process working on the higher carbon number feedstock, so ethane or propane. So the reason for this being, so there are alternatives to convert ethane through steam cracking to make ethylene, and that's what the dominant use of that ethane is, propane through dehydrogenation to make the propylene. But what happens is on the propane case, you have to go to very severe conditions, and so you end up coking a lot. And so the coking, you end up having to burn and have a continuous burning of that, or a cyclic burning, heat recovery, and you have a lot of complication. A lot of your capital's put into cooling, heating, regeneration, and such. And so we don't have any of that. Our catalyst will last very, very long because we run at much milder conditions, have a much higher yield because of the conditions we're running. And similarly for the ethane to ethylene, the steam crackers run over 1,000 Celsius, and so we'll be much lower temperature than that, so have a higher ethylene yield. So these are the development pathways for that. So your question about gas versus oil price, today's ratio is fine for good economics, and like the others, we're working toward getting the commercial unit operational so that then we can expand from there.
Dave, we have a question over there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is for Stephen. Can you describe the naphtha that is suitable for your process in terms of total number and PONA? And then the second part is, what do you do with your product in terms of Tier 3 gasoline and sulfur?
So the naphtha we've processed maybe 40 different naphthas. Basically, the process can tolerate any naphtha you give it. The constraint on it will really be the endpoint on your gasoline. You really don't want to process it and then have to fractionate out a little bit of diesel out of the back end. So we go up to 380 is what we've seen in the naphtha. Sulfur, we've gone up to 1,000 ppm. It's a temporary poison. The catalyst is regenerated once a month approximately. So if you get high sulfur at 1,000, we may only have a 20-day run. But it regenerates. It's not a permanent poison. The finished product, I mean, the ideal feed is a broad cut naphtha, and it comes out looking a whole lot like an RBOB. Benzene's relatively low. Sulfur's at 10% of what the feed was. So 100 ppm input, you get a 10 ppm output. On a full range naphtha would probably be about 1 to 1.2% benzene and 92, 95 octane. So it makes it it's a handy blend stock, very close to being an RBOB. Yes? No, excuse me, is that the, yeah. Go ahead.
Following up on that, what about if you run any straight run Fischer-Tropsch paraffinic naphthas?
No, it works pretty nice. I'm not sure what the feedstock was, but we had a 62% paraffin stream that we ran. Normal paraffins have about a 80% to 90% conversion to something else, isoparaffins, some of them cycloparaffins. And so it chews up well on paraffins. Olefins aren't a problem either. Diolefins, like anything, you'll plug your exchangers and such, so you want to get rid of those. But we could take it on the catalyst and then would just burn it off once a month in regeneration.
Thank you. So let me ask you a question while you have that. Notwithstanding the example you gave where you're cutting down the sulfur content, aren't you really competing against ethanol? Isn't, I mean, if what you're providing is a high octane product, many refiners have turned down their reformers because they've got all that octane in the ethanol.
There's a lot of points in your comment there. I'll raise one point that I had a question for Uday. He had shown $4 an octane barrel, and I'm using 1/10 that for my presumed economics for octane barrels. I'm not sure how valuable the octane barrels are. Ethanol will be mandated in at 10% or maybe 15%. That's just sort of a fact. There's no economics left, if you will, after that, once it's in. So where we would come in is just an economic way to take naphthas and make a finished gasoline out of it. And with all the light crude coming up, we've got a lot of surplus naphtha, even more so in the light virgin naphtha, the C5s and C6s. And so we're able to take that and get them into, get it into the gasoline pool.
Yes, sir.
One more. What's the mass balance for the methanol? How much methanol do you need per naphtha?
It's typically on like a volume basis, 30 for every barrel naphtha, 30% methanol. We've done it up to 60%. It gets higher octane and it does just more of the same. I haven't seen where the economics break on that. And the methanol gets used up pretty clearly. Most of our runs, we don't have any methanol breakthrough in the water. But in an operating case, I think when you reach the end of the run, toward a month or so, there might be some trace methanol in the sour water that comes off of it. But we've seen that to be very low. A sour water stripper would take care of that. I'll mention the methanol, that activating agent that works with the catalyst, can be any alcohol and can be any kind of purity as long as it doesn't have organic crap in it that turns into Coke. So mixed alcohols look good. Ethanols, very good. All depends on the real value of ethanol moving into it. I think some of our early units here, like our demonstration unit in the U.S., may well run on ethanol because a lot of refineries are near a blending plant and there'll be an ethanol supply. They just need to run a pipeline back and contest it out that way. Maybe the economics will be good, but I can't imagine that ethanol would be. But you keep in mind that with methanol, about half of it becomes water. When you go to ethanol on a weight basis, only about 1/3 of it becomes water. So you get it in a more high-value product. That methanol can also be replaced by light olefins. And so we're looking at FCC dry gas to pick up the ethylene and a little bit of propylene that's in that. And my numbers are in tons now. Refiners don't like that, but we're using $400 a ton as a methanol price. And the ethylene price in fuel gas, when you're not recovering it at a refinery, is only like $250 a ton. So it's a lot cheaper, and it makes a lot more hydrocarbon. So it's in terms of barrels or tons of carbon, it's even better. That's quite an attractive add-on to it. But it adds the need to pull out that FCC dry gas and clean it. We can't take all the hard to understand what's in that gas. It needs to be cleaned.
Great. I think I can see Ron moving up here, so I think we're running out of time. Let's give the panel one